Chapter 731. Rock the Baby. Once Katerina was fed, Dominic rocked the little one to sleep, humming a lullaby that he remembered his mother humming when he was little. As Alexis' soft snores filled the room, the midwife leaned over to whisper to Dominic, "That one is going to be just like her parents, in all the best and worst ways. Look how she smiles when you hum old war ballads to her." Dominic chuckled. "Well, I've heard alternate versions of it as well. But I do rather like it in its original wording. But my mother used to hum it to me this way, and it always put me to sleep. I think that the witches will have something ready by morning that will reduce the issues with sharp claws and dragon fire. They would have told me by now if they didn't think they could do it. That will be wonderful. The Duchess should be back into reasonably mobile shape in a day or two with the healing we've given her. However, I fully expect that she will be too exhausted to be doing a full training routine for some time if she continues to insist on doing all the feeding herself. There are nursemaids available in town if you would prefer. Troll milk is good for dragonkin babies. I know that she is going to be reluctant. The Duchess has been quite protective of her little one. Unusual for a princess, who usually passes the child off immediately. But she's always been a romantic and sentimental sort, from what the guards have told me." Dominic laughed. "That is true. She is definitely a romantic at heart. But once the exhaustion truly sets in, I think that she will accept a wet nurse for at least some of the feedings. I will talk about it with her in the morning. Though, as she's able to grow claws, I guess we should be glad that the little one doesn't grow fangs. Feedings would become a real issue if she had teeth." As he spoke, Dominic slowly radiated mana toward his daughter, testing whether she could absorb it. Highly skilled magicians were often born with the ability, and it was one of the tests that would be run on all royals on their first birthday. So, there was no harm in doing it now. It would be years before even the most talented could do more than simply hold a tiny bit of mana in their body. It wasn't until puberty that the mana pathways fully formed. Of course, for a dragonkin, the innate magic would come earlier. Dominic's had come about the same time that he started school. "If you are comfortable taking care of her for a bit, I will go get cleaning supplies. If she is asleep, you can put her in the bassinet." Dominic smiled, then winked at the midwife. "She needs to be extra asleep for that, or put in while she's awake. Watch." He gently placed the child in the bassinet, and her eyes immediately shot open, and her lips curved into a grin as she began to wiggle, demanding that someone turn on the rocking function. "Well, that is unfortunate. But..." The midwife turned the device on, and Katerina burbled happily as the bed began to sway, then slowly closed her eyes. It's all about patience. The same thing happens when you pass her to a new person. I think that she's going by smell because her eyesight seems to be no better than any other child. She just recognizes that she has moved and somewhat remembers what happened the last time she was in that place. She's got a brilliant mind, compared to other newborns. At least, compared to human newborns. Trolls and goats are pretty aware and mobile from birth, but humans are pretty useless for the first few months. Dominic chuckled quietly, so he didn't wake the baby. "That is true. A baby troll will be crawling within a day. But my wife would definitely not be impressed if our little bundle of joy did the same." The midwife shrugged. "I doubt that will be an issue. The royal family has some elven blood, which enhances their youth, but dragonkin tend to mature much more slowly than humans. She might be quick in the early stages, but by age 5 she will be noticeably smaller than most of her human peers. Look at you, you've got to be 20-something by now, and you still look to be in your later teens." Dominic sighed. "Only in bad light. The last half year has put more age on my face than the 5 before it. But you're right. Even when I arrived in Signia City, I definitely got noticed for the baby face. Pretty boys have it hard, I tell you." The midwife shrugged. "Trolls don't suffer from that affliction." Her sly grin made Dominic laugh. She was 100% correct. There were many things that you could call Larry and Dave, but a pretty boy was not in any way, shape, or form accurate. The midwife excused herself to go get cleaning supplies and whatever else she needed, while another troll came in to replace her. "Will you be remaining in the chair? Or should I bring out a cot for you?" She whispered. "No need. I will go to bed soon. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was properly asleep before I left. It's probably too much to ask that the little one might sleep through the night, but in the bassinet, she should sleep for at least a few hours and give Alexis a break. The new arrival nodded. We will make sure that both princesses get their beauty sleep. We also prepared some bottled milk, in case the little one is willing to accept it. Many dragonkin and trolls won't. They know that the taste of the bottle is wrong, not living or possibly just not the right person. It's not a proven theory, but I have seen more than one reject the bottles until they're older. Chapter 732. Dominic's Schedule. Sometime around midnight, Dominic returned to his room, hoping to get some sleep before the sun came back up, and things got chaotic. Everyone was going to start sending congratulations, though the custom was that the baby wouldn't be shown to the public for at least a month. If they were feeling protective, many royals would keep the child in their home and away from public events until they were officially announced at age 5. Dominic was under no illusions that he would actually be able to keep their child indoors and under supervision for 5 entire years. They would be lucky to make it 1 full year before the little one could speak and move well enough to demand to see more things. People called it the terrible twos, but Dominic was certain that it actually started the moment that they learned to walk. As predicted, Dominic was called out of bed early the next morning to take care of the leftover matters regarding the duchy's operation, while the staff quietly took on as much of the workload as possible. Some things an advisor could sign off on or forward to someone else for resolution. Others, they could arrange a meeting date for, as they were in charge of Dominic's schedule anyhow. That didn't technically need his input, unless he wanted to cancel at the last minute. Initially, they had treated the operation the way that they would have treated the running of any other duchy, but now that there were 2 entire provinces under his jurisdiction, this was very much an undepopulated country again, and not just a noble estate where the Duke could handle it all himself. Benedict, the leader of the Wavemates Royal Guard, sat with the other advisors for an early breakfast before they woke Dominic. What are the odds that someone is going to try to make Wavemates an independent kingdom again? We should likely start preparing for the separatist rebels now, Alistair suggested. Benedict shook his head. I don't think that is going to happen, honestly. They have the Wavemates prince in charge, the way that they wanted, and the territory is, in essence, still what they want it to be, but as a vassal of the Signian kingdom. That works out well for the people as long as the king doesn't start getting too involved and messing with their system of governance. But it also works well for Dominic, as nobody is going to come for him the way that they did the Dragon King, as long as he's technically just a duke. Yeah, he's running the country here, even if we call it 2 provinces. But you can't attack them without attacking Signia as a whole, and they're not only better trained and armed than anyone else in the region, they also have hundreds of thousands of battle-tested veterans. My guess is that the first attempt will be political. Once young Princess Katerina starts to grow up, or perhaps one of her brothers, the factions within the palace will start pushing for a change in governorship. Most likely to someone unrelated to the family, but possibly to some favored young nobleman that could be married to the princess. That route doesn't put them on the wrong side of a civil war, but it would also grant them governorship of the entire region through the princess. I don't know how things will be in 20 years, but when an untitled woman marries a titled man, he inherits any obligation she holds, such as the succession to future titles, through their children. That would be the safe way for them to try to remove him. But as far as those pushing to be independent of Signia, I don't think it will happen unless he pushes for it himself. Our lord seems quite content letting someone else hold the title of king, while he runs Westover and its territories. That might lead to the king changing his mind and trying to appoint a new governor. But that's a matter we will have to deal with when Dominic's power grows large enough that it matters. Really, that's more your department than mine. I'm in command of the Royal Guard. You are the advisors, so you are the ones responsible for solidifying his political faction. Jack Merlot sighed. He was afraid that someone would say that. He had just arrived here from the capital, it seemed. And now there was talk of political factions, secession, and civil war by the end of the generation. He had been hoping to get away from all that. No matter. If he could get other nobles on their side with a keep the king happy with our loyalty sort of plan, then he could keep those silly notions of troublemaking on the very back burner. Already, they were in the king's good graces because of their magitech and food production. As long as they kept shipping farm produce at reasonable rates all over the country, it would be difficult to argue that they were not loyal or that they were not willing to help their fellow noblemen. On that note, he had a suggestion. Why don't we push for the mages to make a permanent portal array for the Merchants Guild? Set a fee for use, but keep someone there full-time so that they can always send caravans directly to their destination. It will help keep the academy funded, it will keep the shipping costs and times down, and it opens up all new markets for us. If we set regular portal times to Westfield, Coster, and Limpsbury, we can gather the produce from the rest of Stantia province, then have the guild forward it to Castle for the central region. I'm thinking Biverlow for the southeast and eastern Midfield, then another to the capital to keep us connected. That plus our once-monthly delivery to Albrol's, and it should keep the city fully connected. Just convince the mages to keep the portal to each location open for one full day, once every week. That's 6 portal days, and 1 week turnaround is still faster than traveling by wagon train to any of those locations, except in the middle of the dry season. Alistair smiled. You, sir, might be a genius when you're sober. Yes, the mages might charge an exorbitant price for a caravan-sized portal every day. But the free movement of people and goods for that time period will be totally worth it. I would add Withdeton to the list, though. The capital of Axbridge is too far from us to conveniently send caravans into Signia, and it's part of our trade agreement. Adding a portal day for them to send people here, half the distance to the capital city, would be huge for their trade. Especially if we are going to be running portals to the capital anyhow. Jack, write up a proposal and get it ready for Dominic and the mages. I'm sure that they will approve, and it will just be a matter of deciding the fee to use the portal. That's not against our trade agreements, as it's not a tariff on goods. The accountants can figure out the exact amount. You just write the proposal in a way that will make the Duke approve it. Chapter 733. 1 week in. By the end of the week, Dominic was beginning to think that things were beginning to run as intended, as his workload had dropped significantly, and Alexis was beginning to understand why most other noble women took a wet nurse. In fact, she was considering it herself. Keeping up with the infant feeding schedule left her no time for proper sleep, much less getting anything productive done. The trolls had healed her body, but she still needed to get back in shape and rebuild muscle tone that had been lost during the light training of her pregnancy. But when all you could feel was exhaustion, there wasn't much else on your schedule. Dominic was helping. Or, at least he was trying to. At the moment, he had Princess Katerina in his office, swinging happily in a makeshift hammock while he reviewed documents that the advisors had vetted for him. She had just been fed and changed, as happy as she could possibly get, so Dominic wasn't too worried about what she might get up to. However, the advisors were regularly looking over as the little one giggled, growled, and flailed her arms. "Are you sure that she's fine?" Jack finally asked. "Pretty sure. She still sounds happy." Dominic got up and picked up the baby to sit her on his lap while he worked. Now, he could be sure that she was fine, though he could see her if he just looked over. "So, as we were saying, if you approve it, we will have Withdeton added to the portal rotation. It will just need a matching array built in the Axbridge capital, but we're certain that the king or the crown prince will approve it." Jack explained. "All right. I don't see anything wrong with it. We can always lock it down if there are threats against the city, or the trade alliance begins to break down. Keep in mind that soon we will be getting nobles and royals from all over coming here to ask for funds. The workers for the investment bank are working overtime, getting all set up." The old soldier sighed. "Right, almost forgot about that monstrosity. Isn't there anything that we can do about it?" Dominic winked at him. "I'm going to gift them some flowers later. More specifically, the wall of brambles with an emphasis on flowering roses. If we cover the whole building in creeping vines, not only is it defended, but we don't have to look at it." "Well, that's an elegant solution for the issue. All right, we will wait for you to redecorate the building. For now, we will send a message to Crown Prince Fahad and see if he will approve the building of a permanent portal array. I'm thinking that we should make ours in sections so that we can have them all active at the same time without any of the portals overlapping. We just need a place to put it, probably somewhere near the airship docks, so that caravans arrive in the industrial section of town. But it's also the arrival point for guests, so we don't want to just dump it in the warehouse district." "All right, we can work on something. What about putting it toward the other edge of town? If we put it out there, we could build a park near it, and have those delivering into town enter via Main Street, while the rest circle the city to go to the warehouse district. It would also give us an extra space for building a public attraction. Something for the people to brag about to the new arrivals is always a good idea. The advisors thought about it for a moment. Then Lord Blackwell smiled. Actually, we have the perfect spot. We can put it in the park near the farmer's market. They'll have to pass all the best-looking parts of town to get to the market or the inn, and it's got a straight shot out of town, while also having a wide street straight to the Merchants Guild warehouses. It will make traffic in town worse, but that's not much of a price to pay for the way that it will push them toward the core of our business district. Everything from the sales office for the automaker to the forge, the bakery, and 3 of the Magitech shops are all in close proximity to the farmer's market. Once they're in the region, they'll naturally want to shop. And we will have an excuse to keep the market fully stocked every single day of the week, and not just on market day once a week. That will let everyone in town do much smaller shopping trips for fresh produce. That will make Dave happy as well. Let's go with that plan, unless there are objections. Katerina flailed her arms, babbling happy, incoherent nonsense, then tried to eat one of Dominic's fingers. Well, that's one more vote for fresh food. Seeing the telltale signs that the little one was going to start demanding food soon, in the most vocal way possible, the nanny who had been chosen to help Alexis quickly collected the young princess and took her away to where her mother was resting. We've got a bit of time now, so let's get through the last of this paperwork, and then we can get on to the hiring requests. As near as we can guess, we're thinking that 4 more staff for the duchy, 6 for the duties of each governorship, and then 2 full-time mages to facilitate moving them around. That's 18 more people to keep up with everything, and a lot of travel for a few of them, so they'll need to include at least 1 mechanic. That shouldn't be too hard to fill. We can recruit them from all over, if we don't have enough trained of our own. In fact, we could just send them along with the soldiers instead. They need to patrol the region anyhow, and the team in charge of keeping census and passing on edicts can do their jobs just fine accompanied by the knights. That will save us a lot of headaches and a few people for the team. So, make it 14 total new hires, and your devoted advisors will take care of getting them all set up to do the worst of the paperwork. Chapter 734, New Hires. 2 weeks later, they had all of the new hires that they needed for the administration of the 2 provinces, and Dominic had called them all to the manor for breakfast so that he could see how they worked together and assign them their first tasks. Every new hire for the administration jobs was the son of a nobleman, and some of them were from quite high-ranking families. Dominic did wonder if they would be able to work together and just how the decision had been made, but Jack had assured him that this was the best combination that they could have hoped for. Still, Dominic had questions and had called them together for one large group meeting before they started. If it seemed like a disaster, he would find a way to replace some of them immediately. As one should expect from the sons and daughters of wealthy noble families, the new hires were incredibly well-dressed, much more formal than even Dominic was on most days. There were also far more than the 14 that they had agreed to hire. Jack cleared his throat to get Dominic's attention. Duke Westover, please meet your new administration assistants and their families. They are all young, but we chose those who would be happy to settle down within Westover, so none of them is in line to inherit property, and all of them are happily married. Not all the husbands are the ones hired. Some of these fine ladies have exceptional administrative skills and have convinced their husbands to come here with them. Greetings, everyone. It's a pleasure to see you all here today. How have you been settling in? I am informed that the last of you arrived yesterday. Very well. Thank you, Your Grace. If it's not too forward, we did bring a small token as a baby shower gift. One of the ladies suggested. Oh, I'm certain that the princess will absolutely adore it. Dominic replied. That was the cue for everyone else to bring out the gifts they had prepared. Small things, intended for the baby to use in its first year of life, as there would be a need for nearly everything, as this was their first, and they didn't have generations of hand-me-downs. Not that anyone thought that Dominic was incapable of getting whatever he wanted or needed, but it was the principle of these things. You made sure that your liege lord had enough of the little things that he didn't feel pressure to go looking for them. The lack would make his wife feel like she was being snubbed or neglected, and many got touchy if they saw that someone else had something they hadn't managed to obtain. Alexis came downstairs, fully prepared for a formal engagement and dressed to impress. The baby weight was already nearly melted away, a feat that Dominic found something close to superhuman, and the dress was one of his favorites from her closet. The young princess is sleeping at the moment, so she won't be making an appearance, but I will thank you all on her behalf. Alexis joked. The new hires bowed respectfully as she came down the stairs and into a side-armed hug from Dominic. These are our new hires to help with the administrative work. I believe that you might know a few of them. They're all children of titled nobles, so they may have visited the palace before. Dominic explained. Indeed, some of them were actually from the capital. Indeed, it is good to see familiar faces again. What sort of administrative work did you hire them for? Someone needs to tour the rural areas to get the census and track village populations, then others need to meet with the nobles to collect grievances, inform them of changes in policy, and other initiatives. But mostly, I needed more people to handle all the paperwork that comes with governing 2 provinces. They're all loyal, trained, and proven competent. So, on the advice of my existing team, I had them hired. We will make time to introduce them to all the more colorful locals soon. Alexis laughed at Dominic's description. Introducing the new hires to a village full of trolls that were the duchy's primary method of paying off Dagos for Kynwyn province was going to be an entertaining event. Well, then I had perfect timing. Welcome, everyone. Have a seat, and I will have someone bring refreshments. Dominic nodded for the waiting maids to bring everything in, and Benedict vanished down the stairs to go get some of the good stuff from storage. There would be honeyed wine with breakfast, obviously. But there was a stash of mead that had been made at level 10, and the royal guard was saving it for special occasions. Ruining the palate of new hires seemed like just the occasion. The food was brought out, and the new hires simply stared at it for a few seconds before accepting that Westover Manor had much more luxury than they had expected. The rumors about the duchy were all over the place, with some saying that it was just a frontier duchy being funded by the princess to keep up pretenses, while others said it was actually the king funding it to use it as a trade post, and only a few would actually acknowledge the truth. Westover had been resettled for less than a year, and already it was at as high or higher standards of living for the residents than most of Signia. They had realized that as soon as they saw their apartments. However, seeing the assortment of dishes with ingredients from a half-dozen different nations for a casual breakfast was something else entirely. Even if the Duke was flexing on them, it wouldn't have been easy for most to get all of this. Alexis could see what they were thinking and decided to tease them a little more. Everything here is Westover grown, with a little help from trollish magic. Even the coffee is grown inside the manor walls. There were the expressions that she was hoping for. Chapter 735, Learning Westover's Ways. As breakfast went on, the new hires began to realize that Westover was nothing like what the rumors had suggested. Not the good, nor the bad ones. Instead, what they found was a city that was both super modern, with only the highest tech of vehicles and home amenities, but also heavily focused on their agricultural sector, growing a wide variety of crops that seemed intended to provide some specific diet that they hadn't quite figured out yet. If they had a troll with them, they would have known. The crops that were grown in Westover were a combination of things that stored exceptionally well, like root vegetables and spices that could be dried, and things that went well when combined with them in a soup. It really wasn't that complex. However, they were beginning to add more crops that weren't soup-related. Things that were more common among the various royal household recipes, so that they had locally grown versions of the dishes that the other nations' royal families liked. They had finally gotten a month to themselves, where they weren't hosting any royal family members who didn't live here in the duchy. But that was never intended to remain the state of affairs, and the agreement that they had between nations named Westover as the central point for international trade. That would pull the royals back here, even when they didn't have issues serious enough that there were visiting nobles pleading their case to the investment bank. Your Grace, I do believe that we're going to have an easy time adjusting here. While many of the local dishes seemed quite exotic when I was touring the town last night, I now realize that we are fully able to stock a proper Signian kitchen as well, with all of the spices and herbs that we would have had back in the capital, one of the men noted. His wife nodded excitedly, and then the man's smile turned slightly concerned. But on that note, I don't suppose that there are domestic helpers available in town? I didn't see any signs of vagrancy, or a slum quarter where one might hire new servants. Alexis laughed and shook her head. No, we don't have either of those. But we do have domestic helpers for hire. What you need to do is put up a job notice on the job board by the market. Anyone who has a child interested in the work or who is looking for a long-term posting themselves will contact you. Our city is made up entirely of refugees, and many of them served noble houses before. So, if you're looking to hire a maid or chef for your home, that is something that won't be an issue. A few of the other men were giving him sly looks. It wasn't that they were inordinately wealthy and simply couldn't accept not having domestic help, though they did make enough from the job that they could comfortably afford to hire at least one person to help around the house. The issue was simply that his wife could not cook. Not had never been taught to cook. That would have been a much more simple matter. No, she was an absolute disaster in the kitchen, and if he was left with her cooking every day, he might not survive. A few of the others would also look to hire a housekeeper, someone that would clean the place, but for most of them it would be a part-time position. Only a few of them had chosen to move into larger estates, either because they were planning a large family or expected to have family members move in with them at some point. Whether it was the husband or the wife's family, it wasn't uncommon to take care of the older generation in their retirement. For the new hires, that would generally be the wife's family. One of each pair had come from a titled family who had an heir to take over and would be staying on their lands. But that was not true for all the people they had married. Many of them were noble-blooded, but not landed and titled nobility. So, if the other family members were either unable or unwilling, it would fall to whoever was left to take care of them. But that was a bonus in the eyes of some of these noble sons. Having the in-laws living with them meant that they didn't need a chef, their mother-in-law would do it. They also didn't need a nanny for the children, and they didn't need a castellan or a dedicated host if they had a family compound, as the in-laws would help fill those roles. Someone needed to greet the guests, and it was actually considered to be more polite to have the father-in-law do the job than to have a servant welcome guests, assuming that you could stand to live with them. If you would like, I can arrange a group posting and have a small group of applicants come here for dinner today. Alexis offered. Oh, that would be wonderful. If all of us who need help can meet with the whole pool, it will save us some trouble with trying to find the right match. I have a rather particular requirement for domestic help, so I do hope that I can find someone suitable, one of the ladies insisted. Oh, Alexis asked, starved for gossip after everyone left the manor. The young woman smiled. My husband's family is well known for their wandering eye, and we have an agreement not to hire anyone who he may be tempted to disregard his marital duties with. The husband shrugged helplessly. It keeps the peace in our home, even if I have had to change cooks twice in 8 years, due to retirements. Alexis gave him a sympathetic look. I am not looking forward to the day that our chef retires. You may not know yet, but we hired Chef Beth from the Royal Kitchens to come and cook for us here in Westover. It is her expertise that we can thank for the quality of the meal today. Replacing her is not going to be an easy task. No offense to her successor in training. Chapter 736, New Jobs. By the time that the meal was finished, the notification had been sent out and posted on the jobs board by Dave. That was enough to draw curious job seekers and gossip-minded individuals to the board to see what had come available. And what they found was precisely what the city had been hoping for. Jobs that weren't listing trade skills as a requirement. Many of the refugees were shop workers or domestic help before the disaster. They didn't know carpentry, magitech, or any of the other skills that the factories wanted. But they did know cooking and cleaning in a noble house. Well, that is interesting. Full-time domestic help, part-time cleaners, even a listing for an inheritable position as head maid of a family. Now that is impressive. But do we have anyone who qualifies? I think that we do. There are a few aunties with the experience, if they're willing to come out of retirement instead of living off the hard work of their children, one of the women taunted. She had a good job at the auto factory. She could afford to tease the others her age who hadn't found work yet. Finding work for one person in the family was generally enough to keep the bills paid in Westover. But having work for more than one, especially from different generations of the family, was so much better. It says that we can gather at dinner, and they'll have the nobles ready. Does that mean we can get dinner at the manor? That alone is worth applying. If it's the new people, there are only going to be a dozen jobs for all of us. But who knows if they're all someone you would want to work for? Now that we're in Westover, we've got some options, and we're not bound to follow the only nobleman in the region." The others laughed quietly at the optimistic boy. He had come from somewhere in Dagos, going by his accent. In Dagos, the commoners working for the nobles were only one step better than living in slavery, so his enthusiasm for finding a decent noble that wasn't going to claim his entire life in return for work. But more importantly, they might actually get to meet the new princess earlier than anyone else if they went for the hiring event. There was no guarantee that Princess Alexis would bring the baby out to see them, but it was possible. And possible was enough. Princess Katerina seemed happy to oblige, and when everyone started to gather in the back garden to meet the prospective employers, she was very vocally demanding to join in on whatever it was that she could hear. Her eyesight wasn't yet good enough to see from her nursery to the garden, but the window was open for fresh air, and she knew that they were doing something interesting. Being alone was simply not acceptable. Dominic laughed as he saw a veiled maid bouncing the little one on her hip, standing on the balcony, overlooking the garden. The guests hadn't noticed yet, but it was only a matter of a few more seconds before the noise of a baby, an uncommon one in a ducal manner, would attract their attention. The first looks came from a few of the wives, when Alexis turned up to look at the balcony, smiling at the loud little bundle in the veiled maid's arms. The one holding the baby was Wendy, the carpenter's wife. She had 4 daughters that were also among the veiled maid force, so she certainly had enough experience to know how to calm a screaming baby. But Princess Katerina was a different beast altogether than her own children. She didn't just make noise to bring attention to things she needed. She made noise to see what happened, or simply to make someone pick her up. Even when the bassinet was rocking, there was a chance that she simply wanted a person to make the exact same motion for her. Not a similar one. That would bring a complaint. The exact same motion, except with her held in a person's arms. The only one who was apparently allowed to just bounce her however he pleased was Dominic. They had their own game going at this point, and nobody else understood the rules. Dominic gestured for the baby to be brought down, so he could use her as a shield against people who wanted to ask annoying questions. If you were holding a baby, all questions became about the baby. Easy win. Unfortunately for him, Alexis also knew this trick and intercepted Wendy before she made it across the garden, claiming the young princess for herself. People would be less boisterous with their congratulations if she was holding the little one, who looked so peaceful and happy in her cocoon of blankets. Not that the weather was bad, and she needed warmth. They just didn't want everyone to know that she had both horns and wings just yet. If someone did come to try to swap out the princess, they would have to do it soon, before the familial resemblance became too clear to easily fake. But if they didn't know about the wings, it would be caught immediately. Will there be more noble household jobs available in the near future? An older woman asked, clearly not impressed with the options that were here. Or perhaps it was the fact that she was much older than the young women who were getting most of the attention. The expression on her face could go either way. There might be some at the baronies and knights' homes, but I can't say for certain. They might pick someone from their territory instead of looking in the city. However, there is one couple that might be a good fit. The husband's family is known for their wandering eye, and the wife is a jealous sort. If you'd like to go over there and chase off the hussies, I'm certain that she would hire you just for the favor. The older woman chuckled as Dominic looked in the right direction. It was obvious who she meant, as the wife was grilling all the young women who came to apply, scaring them away, much to her husband's increasing frustration. He just wanted domestic help, not a mistress. But his father and brother had a bad enough reputation that his own wife didn't trust him around young women. Thank you, Your Grace. I had assumed that she was simply an insufferable person to work for. Any noblewoman who makes a servant cry before even hiring them is not usually a good option. Go and see. She might actually be a miserable person, but I suspect it's not the case. Chapter 737. Job Duties. Dominic watched as the impromptu job fair began to settle into more serious negotiations. There were more job seekers than there were positions, so a few had decided to simply enjoy the manor's hospitality, but it looked like most who had come to find work would get something. Interestingly, the nobles hadn't gone for the apprentice-aged applicants first. From what Dominic had seen in the capital, getting a new servant right from the start of their career was the preferred method. It built loyalty, prevented spies from being sent by other noble houses, and allowed you to finish their training yourself so they learned to do things your way, and only your way. Instead, many of them had gone for applicants with closer to a decade of experience. Ones who knew the job, could adjust more quickly, but who would also be somewhat set in their old habits. And then there were the wives who simply didn't want young women around their husbands. As Dominic had suspected, once the older women gave them a chance, they immediately began to warm up to the women that their husbands would never consider in a lecherous way. It was a great victory for his estimation of what the new hires needed. The event ended early in the evening, as everyone wanted to go home and show their new hires around before they started work the next day. They were not going to have as much time as they had hoped to simply relax and settle into their new homes. The soldiers had a head start on them, and they were nearly finished touring the baronies of Westover Duchy now. After that, it was a nearly empty passage until they got near Limpsbury, so they were going to be sending reports and would be calling on some of the employees to come assist with the issues that the local nobles were wanting to send to the governor. The three major cities would have permanent representatives of the governorship so that the nobles could have a constant point of contact. Each of the first group of men chosen for the jobs in the cities were single, a deliberate choice on the part of the advisors, as they fully intended to move them between the three cities at least once per year. If they had a family, that would be incredibly disruptive, or they would be away from home constantly. But if they left them in the same city for too long, it would eventually breed complacency and give them the impression that they could get away with more than they were authorized to. Their jobs were to report back to Dominic as the governor, not to determine whose input mattered. That level of complacency and overreach was a common form of what the nobility considered benign corruption. It was so common that it was considered part of the job for most nobles. But the advisors had decided to mitigate that by moving them around, keeping them as a somewhat new face to the nobles. They also wouldn't remain on city duty forever. They would be cycled into the rural area census team, the paperwork teams, or anything else that the advisors thought suited their skills. There was also the chance that they would be promoted past the entry-level jobs that they had been given, but that was a matter for later. Currently, Alastair was their supervisor, but after they were fully trained and settled into the jobs, he would appoint middle management to take on more of the workload. But now that the soldiers were about to reach Limpsbury, they were going to get an influx of information for them to sort, a stress test to start their employment. Jack had been the one that approved this idea. If they couldn't handle the weight of a few months of complaints and suggestions from the nobles in the three cities, they were far from ready from what they would have to handle when things were actually going wrong. But also, they were nearing the end of the wet season, so the first reports of harvests and food supplies for the dry season would be coming in. Not only was that important information for the shipments that needed to be made to ensure properly supplied cities, but it was also a gauge of how well the cities were doing. If they were looking short on food or significantly short on something else, it would tell the advisors that action might need to be taken that wasn't directly related to the shortage. A lack of everything but grain crops wasn't just a matter of shipping them other things. It was a sign that either they needed to work with the barons to ensure more crops were planted, or to ascertain what had gone wrong with the other crops. It could be a crop disease, poor farming techniques, pests. With the whole region being on its first full crop since Signia took over, all the nobles were new to the region, and none of the advisors expected them to have things under control yet. That was going to be the real test of the newly appointed Signian nobles. If they couldn't keep things running smoothly enough that their people were in acceptable shape, according to Dominic's estimation, they were in real danger of having an advisor appointed to remedy their governance of their territory for the sake of the Signian kingdom. And nobody wanted that level of humiliation. He wouldn't jump right to it as a remedy, but Dominic wasn't going to let an entire barony worth of people starve because someone couldn't figure out their duties. Noble blood was noble blood. But some men couldn't organize a good time in a brothel. However, these nobles were chosen by the king to come here and take over land that was known to be in rough shape, and Dominic did have some faith in the king's judgment. As long as everyone lived up to expectations, all would be well. Chapter 738. Limpsbury Report. For days after the new hires got their domestic help, the first reports from the military approaching Limpsbury came in. The mages had opened a portal during breakfast and sent a runner through to give their official reports in person, instead of simply opening a small one to pass through a letter to Dave at the manor gates. Your Grace, "We have a report for you," the knight announced as he entered the main hall, where Dominic was waiting for him. Perfect timing. "What has the order found?" The knight took a deep breath and brought out a prepared report, along with what looked like a prepared speech. He was clearly nervous, but he had made preparations to ensure that he didn't forget anything that should be in the day's report, even though Dominic or one of the hired staff was about to go through the portal with him to meet with the nobles and collect their reports in detail. The order has found that the farmers southeast of Limpsbury had a lower than average expected yield for their crops during this wet season. Reported estimates were that 10% of land was not seeded for the season due to weather, and yields were 30% below dry season averages expected by both the farmers and the nobles. However, those numbers do not put them into the severe drought or crop shortage category. Bare subsistence after taxes is set at a standard of 50% of standardized yields. Crop variety is mediocre, but acceptable, with a higher than average pasture crop return for livestock. However, there have been increasing reports of banditry and theft by stealth that the barons have been either slow to address or ineffective at stopping. The knight stopped to take a breath, and Dominic nodded. "That was something that I did expect, and part of the reason that it is your order on patrol, not just the data collectors. Have you found any sign of the cause of the banditry? If it is displaced farmers from Kynwyn province, we can encourage them to go back and move back into their farmsteads." The knight took a deep breath. "I'm afraid not. It appears that the majority of the issue is with bandit groups led by deserters from the old city guards who were disbanded when control transferred from Dagos to Signia. They have organized groups of loyalists to their cause, and they are hiding in the more remote regions, while using their knowledge of the region to loot the remote farming villages. The new guards are not as well trained, and in numerous instances have not been enthusiastic about hunting down deserters who may have grown up with them. It is the recommendation of the Lord Commander that a military incursion be sent to clear them from the region, or the continued patrol of the nightly order be delayed until the issues surrounding Limpsbury can be addressed." That was the part that he had been nervous to deliver. They had no set schedule, but he knew that it could be months before they found and eliminated all the larger bandit groups. But they would never find them all. The locals would take some of them in, or would be pressured into hiding their presence. But in the city, they could blend with the locals, unless they were Dagos nobles, who the commoners of Limpsbury would simply turn into authorities for the bounty. "All right, I see the issue. We do still have an entire regiment of Signian soldiers here in Westover who can be dispatched to assist. Have the knights gathered intelligence on the possible locations of the bandit groups?" "A few of them, Your Grace. We eliminated 3 groups, totaling nearly 200 men already. However, that only covers a portion of the issue in one quadrant around the city." Dominic sighed. 200 bandits is only a portion of the force in the southeast? That's not even a moderate bandit issue. It's very nearly an invasion force, if you consider the total number of bandits that are likely to be surrounding the city and harassing the farmers. We have soldiers already on patrol as well, and their reports say that they are finding very few bandit groups within Kynwyn province, with nearly no reports of them from the farmers who either remained on their properties or returned to them after the disaster. I had expected the north to be the worst issue, as the Dagos nobles only left during the flooding. However, it appears that many of them might have actually come south to join bandit groups with their manor guards instead of returning to Dagos. The knight nodded. The king and the remaining nobles within Dagos believe them to be deceased during the flooding. We have verified that with the representatives of the Merchants Guild as well. They have been asked by King Gustav to look for bodies or signs of burial for his missing nobles, so that their resting location can be properly recorded and dignified burials provided, if necessary. Dominic hadn't thought of asking Rill about that. He hadn't considered that the nobles who lost lands in Kynwyn during the flood had already turned to banditry before he had known that they were even missing. All right, that is another ongoing issue and a matter of political sensitivity. Asking a group of common soldiers to take care of it is not going to be optimal. Soldiers talk, and if we send thousands of men out hunting rebel Dagos nobles, it is going to start talk of the war not being over. However, I believe that the knights have a modicum of discretion and understand that these men, perhaps women as well, are no longer Dagos nobles. They are deserters who have been stripped of their titles and lands. The knight smiled slightly. That was the response that his commander had been hoping Dominic would give them. As your order will be busy in Limpsbury for some time, I will make arrangements for the advisors to send staff to the other cities directly. There will be some coming with your order as well, joining the patrol to record any issues that the locals report. It appears that your order has done a wonderful job of it so far. However, I am also certain that they will not complain about having someone else do the paperwork portion of the job once they collect the reports. Chapter 739. Inform the Commander. The knight nodded as Dominic laid out the plans. All right, I will inform the commander to await the arrival of administration staff that will accompany us on our mission. We are currently drawing lots to see who has to do the reports, so they will be more than welcome to take over the duties. If there are any others who need to join us, I can ask the mages to hold the portal a bit longer. Dominic shook his head. No. Only the ones that are going on tour will join you directly, and I will have the 3 cities' representatives delivered directly by the mages. Just let the commander know that he is free to take care of business, and that in the eyes of both nations, the claim to nobility made by any of the bandits is invalid, as they have been stripped of their ranks and declared deserters. That's the important part. You can inform the farmers as well, so that if there are any sympathetic voices among the locals, the news will get back to the bandits. Once they know that nobody will be backing them up, they may begin to reconsider their life choices. That didn't seem likely to either of them, but it was a very politically correct answer and gave them all the justification that they needed not to grant the typical considerations that surrender nobility were given. In fact, claiming a false noble title was a capital crime in Dagos, so they wouldn't get much sympathy even if they ran home to complain. The knight returned to the portal, and Dominic sent a troll to go get the men who would be traveling with the knights. Or, as it turned out, the man and woman. He hadn't noticed it at first, but the ones assigned to go on the road this trip were a husband and wife pair. That could be either very interesting or very chaotic for the knights. But it was 2 workers to take care of the paperwork. They wouldn't have to do it themselves, and that was good enough for most of them. The others might be a bit more picky, but they were professionals, and they would adapt quickly enough. As usual, everyone else was more prepared than he was. Or at least Amy was, and she had informed everyone else. So, within minutes there were more mages on location, and the traveling workers were in place with their belongings. Perfect, we can get this all sorted, and begin the hard work of making the provinces actually operate efficiently. Let me know if there are any shortages at all, and any signs of mismanagement. I won't jump right to intervening, but it might be a case where they simply don't know better, and we might just need to have someone come by for a few weeks and lend a hand to get their baronies on track. The workers nodded. Understood, Your Grace. Rest assured that we have prepared for exactly this contingency, and we have brought many textbooks to help us formulate operational plans for any of the nobles who are struggling. It's a common function of the provincial governors, though they usually just use the standard template operations form that every young nobleman learns in basic schooling. A few of the mages chuckled. Everyone knew those. They covered basic crop rotation, budgeting, and the costs of essential supplies. They weren't just useful for the nobles who supplied them for their workers, they were based on what the common farmers actually spent and how they operated. In some ways, it was outdated. Certainly here in Westover things were better run. But if you just followed the guidelines, only a natural disaster would make you fail. Well, perhaps they couldn't be too hard on the new nobles, given the circumstances. But still, it was best if there was someone available to help where needed, as well as keeping the reports. They knew that Dominic intended to cycle them between cities, but they also knew that if they made themselves indispensable to the nobles of the region, the barons would speak up on their behalf to help them get permanently settled. The concerns about corruption were not a mystery to them, and they also knew that the temptation to abuse their positions would come eventually. But they also knew that neither the Duke nor the Duchess was well known to be the merciful sort, and that would be enough to keep any thought of doing things that might get their faces on a missing persons poster, at least for a few years or decades. The only downside to this posting was that being so far away from Westover meant that they were unlikely to get the promotion when a supervisor for them was inevitably appointed. Unfortunate for the career-minded, but not the end of the world to be stuck in senior management. Dominic pretended that he couldn't see the mental calculations on everyone's faces as they prepared to start their new jobs. He had no intention of simply opening portals to go visit the cities every few weeks, so the representatives could basically do as they pleased, as long as they didn't slack at their actual jobs. Besides, Alexis was the one that they had to look out for, not him. She knew all the tricks, the way that money greased hands in the palace, what sort of influence could be bought from people in their position, and how much it would take to train a new person after transferring them the moment she became suspicious of their motivations. Those were all things that they were going to have to teach the young princess as well, but not anytime soon. For now, they were too busy just trying not to let her eat things she shouldn't. Fortunately, the blankets were durable, and they simply got soggy when they inevitably made their way into her mouth. It was anything that was small enough to actually fit that was the danger. Chapter 740. A Chat with Gordy. Gordy, the assistant sent by Asmodane and currently the one doing the majority of the bookkeeping and accounting for the provinces, came to visit Dominic that evening. That wasn't unusual, but the expression that the mage had when he entered the office said that this was about something more important than the possible budget shortfalls from their shipments of relief goods to the provinces and Dagos. "If you have a moment for a private conversation?" he asked as he closed the door and activated the soundproofing. "Of course. What is on your mind?" "Lord Asmodane asked me to obtain a clarification from you. He wants to know if you intend to go to war to take back the Wavemates' ancestral territories and place yourself as king." Now, that was a question you couldn't ask in public. Dominic considered his long-term goals for a moment, then shook his head. "No, the territories are nice, but ultimately, they are just land. The important part is the people. We've managed to bring back so many magic users, sorcerers, and trolls, all our old allies, that the provinces are looking like Wavemates again. The fact that they're under the King of Signia makes no practical difference when I'm the governor, running the day-to-day policy. So, unless the king changes his mind on official policy and wants to act against our citizens, I see no reason to change how things are working. When the Dragon King ruled, he had fake friends on all sides except the one with enemies. But look at the territory now. We've got proper allies on 3 sides, a charity case of an enemy on the other, and we're under the protection of the Signian army, which is larger than the entire population of the 2 provinces. If someone wants to act against us again, we've got their guaranteed backing, on top of the improvements in weaponry. I don't think that there would be a large benefit to trying to break away right now. Not from a political standpoint, and not from a societal. There really isn't anything that the King of Signia is doing that is bad for the people of Stantia province." Gordy nodded slowly. "So, you intend to remain as governor and what? Build up the territory for a generation?" Dominic shook his head. "Build up the entire region for a generation. By the time that I pass this title on to my children, I fully expect that even the people of Axbridge and Skipple will be clamoring to get the newest of Westover-made Magitech. The old capital is gone, a monument to bad decisions by the humans. Westover is taking over now, and the territory is on a new path. Instead of building up just Wavemates, I intend to make the entire region reliant upon us. I want the name Westover to be so powerful that the thought of being blacklisted is enough to make kings behave. But we can't do that alone. We need the backing. If we don't have it, someone is going to come for us, wanting it for themselves. Building up Signia is no downfall to us. I fully intend to drag Mitfield and Axbridge along for the ride as well. If they're doing better than they were, they won't have much to complain about. We've got the trade deal now. We just need the production to push things on a much larger scale." Gordy made notes as Dominic spoke, clearly intending to forward them to Asmodane. "Any other questions?" Dominic asked. "Nothing major. You've got the battle mages here now. You've got me as an advisor, so I think that he just wants to keep up with what your intentions are, in case you might happen to need an entire army later. If it comes down to it, he would likely send back entire regiments of trolls and giants to come assist you in retaking the territory." Dominic shook his head. "That would be a disaster on more levels than one. I can only imagine how the kings would react to it, and we'd end up starting a second dragon war over the issue. It's just not worth it. Look how happy the trolls are." Gordy laughed. "I swear, they're using stone transmission to call more of their kind to the provinces every day. I've been seeing strange trolls everywhere that I scry, looking for bandits and trouble. The spell is attuned to changes in emotion. Normally, The strongest emotions are fear and despair after a bandit raid, especially when I'm searching remote regions. But I keep coming across random groups of trolls setting up camps in villages in the middle of nowhere and singing about goats. Dominic laughed. That reminds me. We need to start a husbandry program. Westover needs more goats. A few thousand more goats. Not only are they the best friends a troll could ask for, but they're also exceptionally popular in stew and what the Axbridge desert nomads call lamb kabuli. That dish with rice and raisins and carrots. Gordy nodded. I know the one. The Duskblade sect makes it fairly often. Good stuff, and simple to make for 1,000 people at a time, since you just make the mixed rice and drop a chunk of meat on top. Now, you can let Asmodee know what the plan is. The rest will be up to us, but if you're finding groups of trolls, let me know where they're settling so that I can add it to the map and have the patrol groups go looking for them to welcome them to the provinces. If they're on the map, they're somewhat official. And if they're official, nobody will try to run them off. I will just have the knights tell them how the taxation system works, since there aren't any trollish villages that will be short on food. Rill might want to strangle us if we add even more trollish villages to his bulk pickup routes, but eventually, we will get it all worked out. If we have too much, we can ship it to markets through Signia and Axbridge. It'll crash their market prices closer to ours, but as the merchants say, all money is good money. And the locals in the cities won't complain if their food prices tank. Probably, the farmers won't either, since it will mean that the local lords won't be coming after so much of their crop to keep the cities happy.